Today I'm going to tell you a story that sounds almost too wild to be true, about a mail-order bride, thrown from a train in the middle of the desert, and a lone cowboy who stepped in to safely save her. But that was only the beginning. Beneath the dust of the Old West lie secret schemes and a fortune that everyone was willing to steal at any cost. If you love stories that feel like classic films rich with emotion and suspense, be sure to subscribe to the channel. The most incredible journeys are still ahead. Texas, 1871, the train screamed across the sun-scorched plain, its iron wheels shrieking like a wounded beast. Dust rose in its wake, curling through the brittle chaparral and vanishing into the amber light. Inside the last carriage, where the heat clung like a second skin and the smell of coal smoke seeped into every thread of clothing, Emmeline Hart sat rigid and alert. She wore a faded blue traveling dress that no longer fit quite right, the fabric stretched at the seams from weeks of hard movement. Her gloved hands gripped the handle of a leather valise, resting at her feet. Its buckles lightly secured its weight, disproportionate to its size. A boy no older than 4 dozed beside her, with his head against her side, his tall chest rising and falling with the rhythm of the train. To the other passengers, she was just another mail-order bride, on her way to a new life, a new man, a new name. She played the role well, soft-spoken, modest, grateful. No one had questioned the child when she'd claimed him as her younger brother, orphaned after a bout of fever back east. It was a lie she'd practiced until it felt almost true. But there was no room for error now. The documents in her valise, deeds, letters, and the original will were her only protection. Without them, she was nothing but a widow running from ghosts. She felt him before she saw him. A man in a dark coat had entered the carriage 5 minutes ago, lingering by the back door instead of taking a seat. His hat was pulled low, hiding most of his face, but Emmeline had been watching him through the glass reflection in the window. He moved like a man with purpose, like a man sent. She shifted, pretending to adjust the boy's position, and tried not to draw attention. Her heart pounded beneath her corset. Outside, the terrain flattened, signaling a stretch of empty desert ahead. No station for miles. Then it happened. The train shuddered slightly as it curved around a low bend. In that moment of imbalance, the man weighed fast. He lunged toward her, one gloved hand grabbing the valise, the other shoving her up from the seat. Emmeline screamed. Passengers gasped, some half rising from their seats, but it was too late. The man yanked the case, and when she wouldn't let go, he twisted her toward the door. Her shoulders slammed into the frame. The boy cried out as she clutched him tighter, protecting him with her own body. The door flew open. Wind and noise swallowed her scream as the man gave one final shove. She fell backward into emptiness. The boy still in her arms, the valise torn from her grip. The fall felt endless. She hit the ground hard, rolled her shoulder, exploding in pain. Grit filled her mouth and ears. The boy screamed once, then sobbed, his arms flailing in panic. Somehow, miraculously, she kept hold of him. Dust swallowed them as the train thundered on, never slowing. Cole Maddox had seen death before. Too much of it. He sat atop a paint gelding named Boone, watching the train disappear into the horizon, a rising trail of smoke, its only goodbye. He'd been tracking a coyote that morning when the commotion caught his eye. Someone falling from the last car. Now he urged Boone down the slope, boots nudging into the dry flank. The desert was no place for strangers, not without warning. Not when the sun baked the ground hard enough to crack bone. It didn't take long to find them. 100 yards off the tracks, tangled in brush and cactus, a woman lay curled protectively around a small child. Blood trickled down the side of her face, and her dress was torn at the shoulder. The boy clung to her blouse, grazing but uninjured. Cole dismounted, his boots crunching dry earth. He knelt beside her, cautious but alert. Her eyes fluttered open wide with terror and pain. "Easy," he said softly, his voice a low drawl, weathered by dust and distance. "You're all right." Her body tensed. "Don't touch me," she rasped, though her voice lacked strength. "I'm not with whoever put you off that train. I saw what happened. I'm just a cowboy with decent timing." She blinked at him, her gaze moving from his worn hat to the revolver at his hip. He offered a canteen. She hesitated, then took it with shaking hands and drank. The boy whimpered again. Cole knelt to eye level with him. "You got a name, son?" The boy looked to the woman. "His name's Jamie," she said, finally pulling him close. "Mine's Emmeline Hart." "Well, Miss Hart, you picked a bad day to ride the rails." She tried to sit up, but winced, clutching her shoulder. "That looks like a dislocation," Cole muttered. "You'll need it wrapped and iced if we can find some shade. Closest town's a half-day ride east. You'll never make it walking." Her lips parted dry and cracked. "They'll come after me if they know I'm alive." Cole studied her face. There was fear there, yes, but not the fleeting kind. This was the fear of a hunted thing. He walked to Boone, and pulled a blanket from his saddle. When he returned, he helped her up, one arm around her waist. She stumbled. He caught her, easily surprised by how light she felt. "We can't stay out here," he said. "This heat'll kill you faster than they will." She looked up at him, the setting sun casting gold into her eyes. "Why are you helping me?" she whispered. He considered for a long moment, then answered simply, "Because somebody has to." Gently he lifted her onto Boone's saddle, then boosted Jamie up in front of her. She clung to the child with her good arm. Cole swung up behind them. The horse shifted beneath their combined weight, but held steady. "You got somewhere to be?" she asked, voice muffled by exhaustion. "Not anymore." He turned Boone toward the low hills in the distance, where he knew of a shallow creek and a copse of cottonwoods. It would offer some shelter until morning. "Where are you taking us?" she asked. He glanced back at the tracks already swallowed by the dusk. "I'll take you the rest of the way." And with that, they rode into the falling light, leaving behind the tracks, the train, and whatever devil had tried to erase her from the world. The ride back to the Maddox homestead was long and silent, save for the steady clop of Boone's hooves and the occasional soft whimper from the boy, cradled in Emmeline's lap. The desert evening wrapped around them like a fading ember, shadows stretching wide beneath a blushing sky. By the time they reached the small ranch, tucked at the edge of a cottonwood grove, the sun had all but disappeared. Cole dismounted first, helping Emmeline down with a gentleness that surprised even himself. She winced as her boots hit the ground, leaning slightly on his arm. A girl no older than 8 burst from the porch with a whoop. "You're back. You're late. I thought you got hit by cougars." "Still in one piece," Cole replied dryly. "Etta, we've got guests." Etta Maddox blinked up at Emmeline and the sleepy child in her arms. Her mouth puckered in thought, then split into a grin. "You brought a lady and a baby. Mama would have liked that." Cole's expression softened. "Help get the blankets ready, will you?" "On it," she chirped, disappearing into the house. Inside the home was modest but clean, warmed by a small fire in the hearth. Etta returned with a blanket and a bowl of cool water, watching with wide eyes as Cole helped Emmeline settle onto the settee. The boy Jamie curled beside her. Cole knelt with the water and began cleaning a scrape on Emmeline's forehead. She finished it first, but didn't pull away. "He's your son," Cole said, not unkindly. She froze. "I ain't prying. Just seems to me a woman don't hold an brother like that in a fall." Emmeline let out a slow breath. "His name is Jamie. And yes, he's mighty old." Cole nodded. "Didn't figure you for a lawyer. But I know why you said what you did. Some folks out here still think a woman's worth is what a false size it is." She looked at him, then really looked. His eyes were worn steady with the kind of sadness that didn't ask for pity. "You lost someone," she said quietly. "Wife and daughter. Fire. 6 years back." A silence passed between them, heavy but not awkward. Later, when Emmeline drifted into a deep, exhausted sleep, Cole gathered the blanket around her shoulders. As he did, he felt something beneath the folds of her dress, something stiff and angular, bound tight to her waist. Gently, carefully, he tugged it free. It was a worn leather pouch strapped close to her body by twine and tucked within the lining of her petticoat. He hesitated only a moment before opening it. Inside were folded papers creased with use, but intact: a deed to land in Wyoming territory, a legal will naming Emmeline Hart as the sole heir, a faded photograph of her, standing beside a broad-shouldered man in a military coat. Cole's brow furrowed. There beside her in the photo stood a man he recognized. It took a moment, but the memory returned sharp as a thorn. Sheriff Boone. Not as he was now, but younger, cleaner shaven. Standing with his arm around Emmeline's husband, Cole refolded the papers and replaced them where he found them, careful not to wake her. He sat back on his heels, the firelight dancing in his eyes. So, she wasn't just a runaway bride. She was a widow with something someone wanted enough to kill for. The next morning, Emmeline awoke to the smell of cornbread and chicory coffee. Etta sat cross-legged nearby, drawing shapes in the dust with a stick. "Mr. Cole says you can stay a while," the girl announced. "I think Jamie likes it here. He's still sleeping." "You look better too," Emmeline smiled. "You're very kind. I'm Etta. Cole's my brother, but not by blood. He took me in when my folks passed. He's good people." Emmeline reached to brush a strand of hair from Etta's cheek. "You're lucky to have each other." That afternoon, Cole rode into town. He returned hours later, jaw tight, silence following him like a second shadow. He handed Emmeline a tin of salve and some fresh bread, then sat across from her at the table. "I saw Boone today." Emmeline went still. "Did he say anything?" "Didn't need to. He asked about the train. Said someone went missing near Sweetwater Gap. Gave me a look, like he already knew more than he was letting on." Emmeline's fingers tightened around the cup in her hand. "Who is he to you?" Cole asked. She met his eyes. "He's my late husband's cousin, and part of the family trying to take Jamie from me." Cole leaned back. "You got papers in that pouch, enough to make a legal claim." She nodded. "Then he won't get him. Not while you're here." Outside, the wind carried the scent of rain. In town, a man in a dark coat entered the sheriff's office. Sheriff Boone looked up, his face unreadable. "Didn't expect you so soon," he said. The man dropped a train ticket on the desk. "Thought she'd be dead by now," he muttered. Boone said nothing. In his drawer sat a letter he hadn't yet burned, written in his late cousin's hand, naming Emmeline as heir, and warning that others in the family wouldn't rest until she was buried beneath the dirt with her secrets. He closed the drawer slowly, the weight of silence settling in his bones. Sheriff Boone sat alone at his desk, the dim light of the kerosene lamp casting long shadows across the papers scattered before him. The letter, creased from repeated folding, rested at the center. He had read it a dozen times, yet the words still struck like a pistol shot. Emmeline Hart, sole heir. The child was the last living claim to a fortune most men would kill for. And some already had. Boone rubbed a hand across his face, his jaw tense with fatigue. Outside the town of Arroyo Creek slept in its dust-laden silence, unaware that its sheriff sat torn between the law he'd sworn to uphold and the debt he still carried like a noose around his conscience. 20 years ago, it had been Emmeline's father who saved his mother's life during a winter epidemic. The old man, then a traveling military doctor, had stayed behind when others fled, risking his life to tend to strangers. Boone had never forgotten that. But now the family of Emmeline's late husband, led by the girl's uncle, a powerful man in Cheyenne, was demanding action. They claimed she had stolen the boy and the inheritance. They claimed she was dangerous. They wanted her silenced. Boone sighed and stood crossing to the window. He stared out at the darkened street, the glow of lanterns flickering in the saloon beyond. If he did nothing, they'd say he'd failed his duty. If he turned her in, he'd be betraying not only the girl, but the memory of the man who'd once saved his mother's life. His thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. A man entered, dressed sharp, in a black coat, his voice clipped and eastern. "The senator's office appreciates your cooperation," he said without preamble. "When you deliver the girl and child, there'll be a seat waiting for you in DCC. We've already cleared it." Boone's jaw tightened. "This ain't a bounty." "It's politics," the man replied coldly, "and survival. You do this, you won't ever have to look back." Back at the ranch, the air was heavy with dusk. Emmeline stood at the porch railing, watching the horizon, where the sky turned deep indigo. Jamie was asleep inside, curled next to Etta, who had insisted on reading him a story, despite barely knowing her letters. Cole approached, boots soft on the wooden boards. "You all right?" he asked. "As all right as a woman can be," she said, who don't know if the law's coming for her or saving her. He leaned beside her, arms crossed. "Boone's a good man under all that stone. But good men can still get pulled under when the current's strong enough." Emmeline turned to him. "You know something. I know he hasn't said a word about you to anyone yet. That buys time, but it ain't a promise." Just then a clatter from inside broke the quiet. Etta burst through the door, her face pale, eyes wide. "I heard them," she cried. "That man in the black coat, he was talking to the sheriff in town today. I hid behind the hitch post. He said they're gonna take Jamie. Gonna put him with some other family. Said it's already decided." Emmeline felt the world drop out from beneath her. Cole moved fast. He grabbed his coat and revolver from the peg by the door. "We're going to town," he said, "now." The sheriff's office was quiet when Cole kicked the door open. Boone looked up slowly from behind his desk. "You want to draw on me, Cole?" he asked. "I want answers," Cole said. "You planning on selling that girl and her boy for a goddamn chair in Congress?" Boone's eyes narrowed. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know enough. I know that family of hers ain't looking to protect that child. They want the land, and they're willing to spill blood for it." Boone stood. "You think I don't know that? You think I don't see what this is?" Cole didn't back down. "Then why haven't you stopped it?" "Because it ain't that simple." Boone slammed his fist on the desk. "You ever had your back to the wall knowing no matter which way you turn someone loses his? You ever stood in this damn room and had to choose who gets justice and who gets buried?" Cole's voice was low. "I stood in a burning house and chose to try saving my wife and daughter. I made the wrong choice. Lost them both. So don't talk to me about impossible choices. Talk to me about the one you still have." The silence that followed was heavy. Boone sat back down slowly, rubbing his temples. "The boy's uncle, he's not just wealthy. He's dangerous. Got connections all the way up. If I go against him, he'll come down on this town like a thunderstorm. And it won't stop at Emmeline." Cole leaned forward. "Then we make a storm of our own." Boone looked up, surprised. "Let's give them a reason to believe she's already gone. Give her time to fight back from a place they can't reach." For the first time the sheriff nodded. "I'll buy you 2 days. But after that, I can't hold the tide." Cole extended his hand. 2 days is all we need." As they shook, neither man spoke the thoughts heavy in their minds that, maybe, just maybe, it was already too late. Back at the ranch, Emmeline held Jamie close as he slept, her heart pounding in her chest. Etta watched from the doorway, clutching the ragged edge of her shawl. "You'll keep him safe, won't you?" she asked. Emmeline nodded, tears stinging her eyes. I'll die before I let them take him. And as thunder rumbled in the distance, the net around them pulled tighter, the air thick with the weight of what was still to come. The storm rolled in faster than expected. Dark clouds blanketed the sky, blotting out the sun and casting a gray pallor over the land. By nightfall, the wind howled across the Maddox ranch, shaking the shutters and pelting the roof with dry sand. Thunder cracked like gunfire, and the air smelled of iron and tension. Inside, Emmeline stood by the hearth, cradling Jamie. Her arms ached, but she refused to put him down. Etta sat curled beneath a quilt, eyes wide with fear, while Cole paced by the front door like a tethered stallion. "Any sign of 'em?" Emmeline asked. "Not yet," Cole replied. "But they'll come, rain or no rain." And they did. By morning, the rain had stopped, leaving the ground wet and heavy. A black carriage appeared on the horizon, drawn by 2 pristine bay horses. It cut a dark line across the prairie as it approached the ranch. Flanking it were 4 riders, 2 federal agents, 1 Pinkerton, and a man in a gray suit with a walking cane. Cole recognized him immediately. Andrew McKinley, the uncle. A snake in a gentleman's skin. Emmeline stood on the porch when they arrived, Jamie behind her, clutching the hem of her dress. The night before, she had quietly packed a small bag, planning to slip away before dawn, to protect Cole and Etta from the consequences of her past. But when she heard Etta whisper Jamie's name in her sleep, and Cole stoking the fire alone with silent resolve, something inside her changed. She would not run. Not this time. She would stand and face them all. Cole and Boone stood to either side. The lawman had ridden out from town at first light, keeping his promise. Mrs. Hart, McKinley called, stepping out of the carriage. "I'm relieved to find you alive. You've caused us quite a worry." "I'm sure," she replied, her voice steady. The Pinkerton agent stepped forward. "We have paperwork authorizing us to remove the boy into temporary protective custody until a court can decide rightful guardianship." Cole took a step forward. "That boy's got a living mother, one with documented legal claim." McKinley smiled thinly. "That claim is disputed. We have reason to believe those documents were forged." Boone cleared his throat and produced a sealed envelope. "This," he said, "is a certified letter from Judge Rowan in Cheyenne, verifying the will and its witnesses. It also names Emmeline Hart as the sole beneficiary and guardian." McKinley's face paled. "You went over my head." "No," Boone said. "I went above it." The Pinkerton looked uncertain, but the federal agents held firm. "This changes nothing," McKinley hissed. "The matter is still pending in the federal courts." "That child isn't yours to take," Emmeline interrupted. "You think I don't know what you did to my husband? He trusted you. And you sent him to his death." McKinley blinked. "You're grieving. You are not thinking clearly." "Save it for the judge," Cole said. But Emmeline wasn't done. She pulled a folded letter from the pouch at her hip and held it up. "This is his handwriting. His words. He knew what you were planning. He wrote it the night before he died." One of the agents took it, reading silently. He exchanged a look with the others. "Is this true?" the agent asked. Before McKinley could answer, a deep voice cut through the silence. "It is." All heads turned. From the far side of the property, a figure approached, cloaked and hunched beneath the weight of years. Preacher Talbot, once the military's legal advisor, now a weary man of God. "I was there," Talbot said, removing his hat. "I was present when Thomas Hart signed his final will, and I kept a copy. But more than that, I was the one he confided in the night before his death. He gave me a letter, told me to keep it safe. In it, he expressed fears for his life. He believed his uncle Andrew McKinley and certain members of the family were conspiring against him. He mentioned a planned ambush during a routine inspection of a mining claim. And he was right. I was present when Thomas Hart signed his final will, and I kept a copy. I feared speaking before, but I can't remain silent. The truth must out." McKinley stepped back. "This is hearsay." "It's the law," Talbot replied. "And the Lord's judgment, if you care for such things." The federal agents conferred briefly. Then the lead agent turned to Emmeline. "You're not to leave the county, Mrs. Hart. But for now, the boy remains with you. A federal inquiry will be launched immediately." Relief hit her like a flood. Jamie clung to her waist, burying his face in her side. McKinley's mask cracked. "You've made enemies, Emmeline. Dangerous ones." Cole stepped forward. "So has she made friends. More dangerous still." That night, back at the ranch, Emmeline stood beside Talbot on the porch. "Why now?" she asked. "Why speak after all these years?" He looked out into the dark. "Because I once stayed silent to protect the church," Talbot said, his voice low. "One of the men involved in the scheme against Thomas Hart was a former seminary student. I had mentored a man I once trusted like a son. When I realized what he had done and what it would mean for the church if his role came to light, I chose silence. I told myself I was preserving something greater. But in truth, I was a coward. And a good man died for it. I will not let another be sacrificed to save reputations. And a good man died. I will not let another be sacrificed to save reputations." From inside, Etta called out, "Jamie wants you to read him that story again." Emmeline smiled. "I will." She turned to Talbot. "Thank you." The preacher nodded once. "Truth is like thunder. You can't outrun it." As she stepped inside, Cole waited in the doorway. "You did good today," he said. "So did you." He touched her arm, hesitated, then let his hand fall. "I ain't much of a praying man," he said, "but tonight, I'm grateful." And as lightning danced along the far hills, they stood together in the quiet, not as fugitives or heroes, but as people who had endured. Outside, the storm passed, but the fight was far from over. The courthouse in Cheyenne was packed. The air hung heavy with tension as the judge entered the chamber. Andrew McKinley sat stiffly at the defense table, his usually smug face pale and drawn. To his right were two of his family's senior lawyers, their suits creased and their brows furrowed. Emmeline Hart stood calm and proud beside her attorney, the sun casting a halo of light through the tall windows behind her. Jamie sat quietly on a bench near the front, flanked by Etta and Preacher Talbot, both dressed in their Sunday best. Cole Maddox leaned against the back wall, arms crossed, hat in hand. Sheriff Boone was seated alone, gaze lowered, hat resting on his knees. The judge wasted little time. After the evidence was reviewed, including the authenticated will, the letter from Thomas Hart Talbot's testimony, and the federal agent's sworn statements, the ruling came swift and without hesitation. This court finds in favor of Emmeline Hart. She is hereby granted full and sole guardianship of her son, Jamie Hart, and is restored as the rightful owner of the Hart family estate. A murmur spread across the room. Then silence. McKinley stood livid. "This is a miscarriage of justice. You'll regret this." The judge banged his gavel sharply. "Sit down, Mr. McKinley." Moments later, federal marshals entered. With no further fanfare, McKinley and two of his associates were placed under arrest for conspiracy, forgery, and attempted unlawful seizure of property. Outside the courthouse, the morning sun broke through low clouds. Emmeline stepped into the light, Jamie's hand in hers. A dozen reporters shouted questions, but she ignored them. She walked forward until she reached Boone. He stood, eyes heavy with guilt. "I should have done more," he said. "You did enough," Emmeline replied. He handed her a folded letter. "My resignation. I'm not cut out to wear the badge no more." But inside that envelope's another letter to the court. "I asked them to show leniency to Talbot. He was wrong to wait, but brave enough to speak. Emmeline's throat tightened. "Thank you, Sheriff." "Not Sheriff anymore," he said, offering a sad smile. Weeks passed. Life returned to a quiet rhythm. Cole spent his days repairing the fence line and teaching Jamie how to fish. Etta helped Emmeline tend to the garden and read aloud from battered books by the fire. Preacher Talbot returned to his chapel, his sermons now quieter, more honest. One afternoon, the town council came to Cole. "We need someone to keep the peace," the mayor said. "You've proven yourself more than once." Cole shook his head. "I'm not putting the badge back on. We need someone steady. Folks trust you." He looked to where Jamie and Etta were racing each other through the field, their laughter bright in the breeze. "I'll help," he said slowly. "But not as sheriff. Deputy. And I won't carry a gun. I've lost enough." The mayor blinked. "Deputy Maddox, then." Summer softened into fall. The prairie wore gold like a bridal veil. One crisp morning, the Maddox homestead was adorned with wildflowers, cotton bunting, and fresh apple pie on every table. The barn was swept clean, its rafters wrapped in twine and ribbon. Neighbors gathered, ranchers, school teachers, the blacksmith, and his shy wife. It wasn't a grand affair, but it was full of warmth. Cole stood at the altar, wearing his Sunday shirt and a crooked tie Etta had tied 3 times before giving up. Emmeline walked down the center of the barn, her hair pinned with prairie lilies, Jamie holding her hand. Preacher Talbot, his voice low and sure, read the vows. Cole looked at Jamie, then at Etta. "You're already my family," he said. "But today I get to say it out loud." Emmeline took his hand. "You didn't save me that day on the tracks. You reminded me I was worth saving." They exchanged rings, homemade and imperfect, and when Talbot said the words, the applause echoed louder than any church bell. That night, as the lanterns flickered and the stars blinked awake, Emmeline sat alone on the porch, watching Jamie and Etta chase fireflies. Cole joined her, 2 mugs of cider in hand. "You tired?" "Not yet." He settled beside her. A breeze stirred her veil, and she smiled. Then softly she said, "When the dust settles, it's not where you come from that matters. It's who's waiting for you at the end." And beside her, in the quiet of a hard-won peace, were the ones who had chosen to stay. Family not by blood, but by love. And the dust at last began to settle. I didn't write this story just to tell you about a woman thrown off a train. I wrote it for anyone who's ever felt thrown off the tracks of their own life. Emmeline and Cole weren't perfect. They were scared. They made mistakes. But they didn't give up. And sometimes out here in the dust-stained West, it's the lost and broken who teach us the most beautiful truth, that love doesn't come when we're ready. It comes when we need each other the most.